Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. We're going to move on to this next topic of understanding this being of God and that you have free will. Sometimes people think that this being God is controlling them or controlling what they experience on a day-to-day basis. This just isn't true. And I'm going to teach you this in a way that you can independently verify. Because remember, none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good will happen for you when you die. I'm going to teach you how to get to enlightenment either with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. Because just like you could choose to have a relationship with your neighbor, and that would be really wonderful because then if you need any help or if you need someone to watch over your house, you've got this nice relationship with your neighbor. But you could also get through life without having a relation with your neighbor too. You'd be just fine, right? So it's the same kind of thing with this being, is that you can have a relationship with this being if you like, but you don't have to. And you can still get to enlightenment because it's not this being that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. So the Buddha did teach about this being, but you'll hear people that will share with you that the Buddha denied the existence of God or that he rejected God. If you hear anybody saying those kinds of things, you'll be able to see that this just isn't true because in the original words of the Buddha, in his original teachings, he teaches about this being of God. So anybody who says that the Buddha denied the existence of God or rejected God, they just haven't penetrated enough into the original teachings of the Buddha to be able to see the truth of what he actually taught. He just didn't put this being at the center of his teachings because it's not this being who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. He put you at the center of his teachings because it's your decisions that determine whether or not you get to enlightenment. So there isn't any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not worshiping this being, but he does make people aware of this being as part of his teachings because people believed in this being during his lifetime. So he needed to teach about this and help people to understand about this being. So I'm going to help you first to understand how I describe this being so that you understand what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to explain to you the teachings of the Buddha based on this being, some of the teachings that he shared on this being. Then I'm going to share with you how to get to enlightenment with a relation with this being or without a relationship with this being. And just like always, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. I forgot to turn on the camera, so 1 second. All right. Sorry for you guys online. Didn't have a picture. All right. Now you guys can see everything. Okay. So now first, let's talk about some definitions because different people think about this being in different ways, and however you think about this being is up to you. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not here to coerce you into believing anything. I'm just here to share with you what I know about this being and every other topic that I teach you about. What you choose to think is your decision, but at least when I say the word God, you'll understand what I'm referring to, and this is the definition that I'm going to share with you guys so you know what I'm referring to when I mention this name God. This being God is the creator of the universe, the source of all moral authority. They are the supreme being. They're the all-knowing, all-powerful being. Some people refer to this being as God. You might hear people refer to this being as Allah in the Muslim tradition, or all-knowing, all-powerful, omniscient, or omnipotent. This is an all-knowing, all-powerful being. Then when I share this definition, sometimes people say, well, what does this mean, this moral authority? Well, when you've learned the natural laws about moral conduct, it's this being that created those natural laws, right? That then we learn these natural laws about the world, and now we practice in accordance with those. But it's important to understand that we all have free will. Sometimes people think this being is controlling you and what you experience. This isn't true. We all have free will. We can make our own decisions about what it is that we would like to do. While this being does have the power to control us, if it was interested in doing so, it chooses not to. We all have free will to be able to make whatever decision we'd like to make. But then we experience the consequences of those decisions. And it's not this being that's determining the consequences that we experience. It's the natural law of cause and effect, or action and result. Again, using just a very simple example, if you were to poke the person in the eyes that's sitting next to you, you would end up probably getting slapped or something like that. You know, someone's going to knock your hand away. that's the results of your decisions. It's not this being God that's choosing to control you, right? This being isn't controlling what you experience on a day-to-day basis. It's your decisions. But with a lack of wisdom of this natural law of gamma, you'll tend to go out into the world making unwise decisions, and you'll experience unwholesome results. So by cultivating wisdom about this natural law of gamma, you'll be able to make wiser and wiser decisions that'll produce more and more wholesome results for you. As I've mentioned, this being God doesn't actually grant enlightenment. It's a practitioner's own decisions that determine whether or not you attain enlightenment. Now, as we talk during this conversation, you might hear me refer to God using the pronoun he, because anytime I've ever had interaction with this being, I've seen this being as a male figure, a male gender. The Buddha even talks about that too. He talks about this being of a male gender. Whether you think of it that way or not, again, it's your choice. If you think of this being as a female, or if you think about this being as having no gender at all, that's up to you. But just understand that every once in a while you might hear me refer to this being using the pronoun he, and you'll understand why, because that's based on my experience with this particular being. But how you think about this being is a choice for you to be able to make. So this is how I think about this being, just as a kind of a definition to get us started. The Buddha did teach about this being. He never denied the existence of God, but instead he taught people how to attain enlightenment with an understanding of this being. In fact, during his lifetime, they believed in multiple gods. So he was teaching about these different multiple gods. If you look in his original teachings, he uses the phrase or the title of Brahma. This is how they referred to God during his lifetime. And he would refer to the God that we're talking about, he would refer to this God as Great Brahma, or the Great Brahma, this all-knowing, all-powerful, supreme being. So this is how you'll be able to see it in his teachings, that he talks about Brahma, and he refers to this being in that way. So he taught people how to understand this being. He actually talks about many different beings that they considered to be gods at that time. Today, based on the work of Jesus Christ, most people in the world, if they talk about God, they tend to think about just one God. But there are some people in the world that still think that there are multiple gods. But the Buddha, he tended to talk mostly about this great Brahma, or this great God, but he also talked about these other gods that people believed in at the time as well. The Buddha's objective was not to prove or disprove God's existence. The way that a Buddha functions is they function through sharing teachings that are independently verifiable. That's how people awaken to enlightenment, is by cultivating wisdom about the world around you. So the Buddha wasn't trying to prove God's existence or disprove God's existence. He was focusing people on liberation of their mind and training their mind to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. So he wasn't presenting any kind of proof that God exists or doesn't exist. He was just talking about these beings, explaining what these beings are, or this being of God is, and then just helping people to understand this being. But he wasn't trying to prove or disprove God. That wasn't his objective. His objective was to help people to get to enlightenment. It was later, when Jesus came along, that he was trying to convince people that there was only one God, because up to that point, people believed in multiple gods. So what Jesus did is he performed a whole bunch of miracles to convince people that he was who he said he was. And then he said, by the way, everyone, there's just one God, right? So it wasn't until Jesus came along 500 years later that the world started to generally understand that there's just this one God. And the Buddha didn't focus on that. So the Buddha focused people's minds on liberation and getting to enlightenment based on what we call right view and an understanding of the natural law of karma, understanding that we have free will and that it's not God's creative actions that produce any particular results in our life. What it means to have right view is that Four Noble Truths that I introduced you to in that last talk, or at least kind of refreshed your memory on, is that if you have wrong view, it means you're going to blame other people for the feelings that you experience. That's wrong view, because what the Buddha is teaching you is right view. To be established in right view is to understand the Four Noble Truths, that the problem in the unenlightened mind is discontentedness. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning. There's the elimination of discontentedness by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to be the complete perfect plan to help you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. So when you have right view, or when you're established in right view, you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, that it's not other people that are causing these feelings. If you walk around with wrong view, then you're going to blame everybody else around you for the feelings that you experience, and you'll never actually be able to solve it that way. So you need to be able to penetrate into the wisdom of what the Buddha is teaching you to be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So that's what the Buddha based his teachings on. That was the foundation of everything, because he was guiding you to eliminate your discontent feelings. So the foundation and the basis of all the teachings of the Buddha is on right view, that you need to first have the right view that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, because then you understand, why are you meditating? Why are you training your mind? Why are you doing the things that you're doing on the path to enlightenment? It's to train your mind. It's not to change other people. So he was teaching right view. Everything was based on that, and the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. What are the wise decisions that lead to wholesome results? What are the unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results? Because when you see this natural law, you're going to have a tendency to make wiser and wiser decisions, because you're interested in experiencing more and more wholesome results. So for example, if we were walking down the beach and the wind was blowing in our face and we were kicking up sand on all the people on the beach, and we were kicking up sand in front of us, and the wind kept blowing the sand back in our face, at some point we would see the cause and effect of this, and we would be like, you know what, I really don't like that sand blowing back in my face, so I'm going to stop kicking up sand. And you learn to stop kicking up sand, because it's unwise to continue to do that. So it's the same thing, is that the more you understand this natural law of karma, and you see that the decisions that you're making are leading to any particular result that you're experiencing, then you can learn through this natural law of karma to stop making these decisions. Therefore, you'll stop experiencing these unwholesome results coming back to you. But when you lack wisdom of this natural law and you have wrong view, you will tend to blame other people for the things that you experience. Meanwhile, you keep making the same decisions over and over and over again, and the sand keeps blowing back in your face. The unwholesome results just keep coming back to you. But when you have right view and you see that what you're experiencing is a result of your decisions, then you realize, well, hey, I just need to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and I'll experience different results. But if it's good luck or bad luck, or if it's destiny or fate, or if it's God that's causing what you experience, or if it's some entity called the universe, or if it's other people that are causing you to experience certain things, you're stuck. You can't change anything about your life, because you can't change good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or God or some entity called the universe, or you can't change other people. And these things aren't actually true. That's not why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. There's no such thing as good luck or bad luck. What you're experiencing is the results of your decisions, right? And you need to be able to see this for yourself. For example, who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning? Who chose where you live? Who chose the job or occupation you have? Who chooses the friends that you spend time with? These are all choices that we make as individuals, and now we experience the results of that. So this good luck, bad luck, destiny or fate, this being of God, the idea of this being controlling us, or the entity of the universe somehow gifting us magical things, or something like other people controlling what we experience. This just isn't true. So you need to be able to see this cause and effect, or action and result of the natural law of karma. So everything the Buddha taught is based on right view in the natural law of karma. And part of that is to understand that we all have free will, that whatever decisions we make, it's going to produce a certain result for us. And now that result coming back to us, if we like it, wow, that's wonderful. We're experiencing wholesome results. But if we don't particularly care for this thing to continue to occur in our life, all we need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and we'll experience different results. So here's a teaching from the Buddha about this being of God and helping you to be able to see you have free will. So I'll share this with you guys, and then you can actually see that the Buddha taught about God, right? Because people say that the Buddha denied the existence of God or he rejected God. But right here, you can see in his words that he's actually teaching about this being of God. But this isn't just one place. There's countless places in his teachings where he's teaching about this being. But at least you'll have the truth to know that the Buddha actually did teach about this being. But here's where he's talking about essentially that you have free will. This is titled, All is Caused by God's Creative Action. Then, monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine in view as this. Whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine in view? When I ask them this, they affirm it. Okay, so I'm going to pause right there. You might think that during the lifetime of the Buddha, he's the only one teaching, right? And because if you lived during the lifetime of a Buddha, you'd probably be interested in learning from that person, right? But not everybody knows that he's a Buddha when he was alive. Not everybody's going to know that because a Buddha doesn't go around performing a bunch of miracles trying to convince people that they're a Buddha. Their teachings are independently verifiable, so they just share their teachings into the world, helping people to understand those teachings. And because their teachings are independently verifiable, people can figure out that the teachings are true. And then over the course of this person's life, more and more people figure out that this person's a Buddha, because there's three criteria of what makes a Buddha, that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment. So after their death. So all the three criteria aren't really in place until after their death. So that's why now, 2,500 years later, we know that he was a Buddha for sure, right? But during his lifetime, not everybody understood that he was a Buddha. And he's not interested in convincing people that he is a Buddha. A Buddha doesn't go around trying to convince people that they're a Buddha, because one of the powers of a Buddha is that they can observe the quality of an individual's mind, their student's mind. They can see the pollutions that are in a person's mind, and then they can offer them teachings to be able to help them to overcome those pollutions. So if a Buddha convinced everybody that they were a Buddha, now people would be on their best behavior when they're around that person. And the Buddha wouldn't be able to use that power of being able to observe the quality of their student's mind and then helping them get to enlightenment. Because the ultimate goal of a Buddha is for as many people to get to enlightenment as possible during their lifetime. That's going to ensure that the teachings continue in the world. And one of the best ways to help someone get to enlightenment is to be able to observe the quality of their mind and then offer them teachings to be able to help them. So you might think that it was only the Buddha who was teaching, but there was actually multiple people who were teaching, claiming that they had figured out how to get to enlightenment. But of course, the Buddha knew that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. So he would sometimes encounter other teachers or students from those other teachers who were teaching different things. And then this is one documentation of where he was actually having a conversation with those people. And he's saying here that he approached ascetics and Brahmins. Ascetics are people who are on the path to enlightenment. We would call this person an ordained practitioner or a monk. A Brahmin, we would refer to this person as a Hindu priest today. That's what a Brahmin is, someone who's worshiping this Brahma or God and doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. We would call this a Hindu priest today. So he approached these ordained practitioners and these Hindu priests who hold such a doctrine in view as this, that whatever they experience, pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, it's caused by God's creative activity. And he asked them, is it true that this is what you guys think? And when he asked them this, they affirm it. They said yes. So basically what they're saying is, when I'm happy and excited, it's because of God. When I'm sad and I'm frustrated and angry, it's because of God. When I'm feeling shy and bored and lonely and all of these feelings, uncomfortable, it's because of God, right? So they're basically blaming what they experience on God, right? Any kind of feelings or emotions that they experience. So then the Buddha says, then I say to them, in such a case, is it due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view? Right? So he's like, well, if God is causing all those feelings, is God causing you to do all these things too? Right? Being argumentative and frustrated and agitated. God's not causing all of those things. You're the one that's choosing to do all those things. You have free will to do all those things. That's you that's doing all those things, not God. Right? So then he goes on, he says, those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. So he's saying, if you think that God's the one who's causing you to experience these difficulties and struggles in the world, then you're not going to do what you should do in order to make your way to enlightenment. And you're not going to avoid doing what you shouldn't be doing in order to make your way to enlightenment. You're not even making an effort to be able to essentially make your way to enlightenment. You're not even putting forth the effort to learn and grow and develop as a person to be able to make your way to enlightenment. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard themselves, and even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. So what he's saying here is he's saying that because they have this lack of wisdom and their mind is confused about what's really causing the things that they experience, they are muddle-minded. Muddle-minded means lacking concentration. Because if you don't understand true reality, if you don't understand the way that the world truly works, your mind has certain pollutions in there. Your mind's muddled and lacking concentration. That's what someone's going to experience who's not on the path to enlightenment, who's not training their mind. Someone who's training their mind and removing the pollution out of the mind, their mind's going to be crisp and clear and focused and concentrated. But for somebody whose mind is like this, who doesn't even realize that what they're experiencing is because of their decisions, they're blaming it on God, he's saying their mind is muddled, that they're lacking concentration and focus. Then he says they do not guard themselves. Whenever the Buddha talks about a guard, this is mindfulness or awareness of mind. He talks about this in other teachings where he talks about using mindfulness or awareness of mind to guard your mind. Because what the mindfulness does for you is that if you're practicing awareness of mind, when you're noticing the anger arising, you'll be able to cut it off and let it go. That's how you guard your mind and you protect your mind. And if you do this for long enough, for a number of years, eventually you get to the point where anger doesn't ever arise. But you need to guard your mind with this mindfulness. So what the Buddha is saying is these beings who are thinking that it's God who's causing all these feelings for themselves, they don't even guard their mind. They're not even practicing mindfulness to be able to train their mind. Then he says, even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. If somebody is an ascetic during the lifetime of the Buddha, they've walked away from their household life, they've given up their worldly life to enter into this life of homelessness and be on this journey to be able to get to enlightenment. So what he's saying is that you're not even on the path to enlightenment. If you think that it's God that's producing all the pleasure, pain, and neither pain nor pleasure that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life, you're not even on the path to enlightenment. That's what he's sharing, right? So this is the Buddha explaining essentially that you have free will, that it's not God that's causing you to experience the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis. And you need to be able to see that truth by looking at your life. You know, sometimes what people do is when they have food, they might pray to God and thank God for the food that they have. Well, it's not God that provided that food for them. It was their decisions that led to that, right? They made the decision to go out to work and to come home and make money and go purchase that food and bring it. God's not the one who produced that food for them. It was their decisions that led to that. That's the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result. So by allowing the mind to stay in this lack of wisdom or this confusion, then it hinders somebody from making the wise decisions to improve their life. Because if we think that everything we experience is because of something else, then we're not making the decisions ourselves to improve our life. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you to how to do, is to make wise decisions to improve your life. But if someone believes that it's God of why they're experiencing the things that they're experiencing, it's just like, well, I'm just going to go through life and do whatever I'm going to do, and whatever God would like me to experience, then that's what I'll experience. But that's not true. What you're experiencing is the results of your decisions. And the more that you see it that way, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for in your life, you just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you experience different results. And now you can improve your life. So this is the Buddha helping you to be able to understand that there is free will. Some more things about the Buddha's teachings around this topic that people are usually studying about God is the Buddha has what's called undeclared teachings. There's certain points in his life where people asked him questions. That's typically how he would teach, is he would just wait for people to ask questions and then he would teach them. So there was a question asked to him and he said, "Remember, monks, what did I teach? I taught this." And what he pointed to was the Four Noble Truths. He said, I taught what is discontentedness. I taught the cause of discontentedness. I taught the elimination of discontentedness. And I taught the path leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is what I taught. He said, but remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gave these undeclared teachings. And these are 10 individual things. Whether the world is eternal or whether the world is not eternal. Whether the world is finite or the world is infinite. What he's talking about here is the entire world, meaning like the universe or the galaxy or however far out that might go. He's never declaring whether that is permanent or impermanent. We understand the earth is impermanent because it constantly changes. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. But in terms of the world as a whole, the world system, he didn't teach whether it's eternal or not eternal, or whether it's finite or infinite. Also, he didn't teach whether their soul is the same as the body or whether the soul is one thing and the body is another. In fact, he never even taught that there is a soul. You won't find anywhere in his teachings that he teaches about a soul. So if you ever hear anybody talking about a soul related to the teachings of the Buddha, you know that they haven't understood his teachings because it's an undeclared teaching. And it conflicts with his very first, most beginning, most basic teaching, that the idea of a soul, this permanent entity that transgresses over life or continues to go forward in life, that conflicts with the universal truth of impermanence. That's his very first teaching, that things are constantly changing, that things in the world are not permanent. But people sometimes talk about a soul and they talk about this permanent entity. But the Buddha never taught that because it conflicts with the universal truth of impermanence. So the Buddha didn't say there is a soul, but he didn't say there isn't a soul either. Because whenever a Buddha teaches, he's going to teach in a way that's independently verifiable. So if he's going to teach you that something exists, he's going to show you evidence and allow you to independently verify that that's true. And if he's going to teach you that there's something that doesn't exist, he's actually going to give you independently verifiable evidence that you can prove that that doesn't exist, right? So the Buddha didn't have evidence that there is a soul or that there isn't a soul. So he left it as an undeclared teaching. He never shared that. So you can see that here. And then he teaches that after the death, the Tathagata exists. This is an undeclared teaching. After death, the Tathagata does not exist. After death, the Tathagata both exists and does not exist. After death, the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist. The Tathagata is himself. He's referring to himself. That's how he would refer to himself. He didn't really walk around calling himself the Buddha. He called himself the Tathagata, which means the one who's discovered the truth or the one who shares the truth. So the Buddha was an enlightened being. So what he's saying is, I'm not going to declare whether after death an enlightened being exists, that it does not exist, that an enlightened being both exists and does not exist, or neither exists nor does not exist. So he doesn't declare what comes next for an enlightened being. And as you guys have heard me share earlier in the course, I suggest that he did this wisely, right? Because his teachings are not about getting to some afterlife. That's not what he's teaching you. He's teaching you to get to peace and joy now in this life. Whereas if there is something next, he didn't say there was, but if there is something next and he describes what that is, that's just one more thing that your mind's longing, yearning for. You can't get content in the present moment because your mind's longing, yearning for this thing that's after this. So he didn't teach that there is something next or there isn't something next, because his path isn't about getting to an afterlife. His path is about getting to peace and joy now in this life. And you can't do that if your mind is still longing, yearning for something after this. So you need to be able to get to the point where in this existence, your mind's utterly peaceful and joyful. And by the time you get to that point, if there is something next, okay, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. And if there isn't anything next after enlightenment, okay, you're already peaceful, you're already joyful. It doesn't matter, right? So he wisely taught that if you get to enlightenment, that he isn't going to declare what comes next. But he did share that if you don't get to enlightenment, there's continuous rebirth and the cycle of rebirth. And this can be independently verified through certain ways of doing so. In volume 11, chapter 105 of our book series, I have 17 different criteria to help you independently verify the cycle of rebirth, where oftentimes people are believing they only have one life, but you don't have any evidence that you only have one life. It's just that your mind right now at this point, you can't remember your previous lives. But as you get rid of your pollution of your mind, you might start having memories of these previous lives. So if you would be interested in learning that, it's in volume 11, 105 for a reason, because that's usually where the better time to be able to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. Once you're about 2 years into your journey, at the beginning, you're just focused on the core central teachings to really get that up and running and focus on eliminating your discontentedness. But understand that these are undeclared teachings, because sometimes people are taught in things like Christianity or Muslim teachings or other teachings that the world is permanent and it's eternal, and the ultimate goal is to die and go to heaven and live in heaven with God for eternity. But you can see that the world around you is impermanent, that this heavenly realm is not permanent. It's not possible. So that's why I included these undeclared teachings here, because oftentimes people are learning about that. Sometimes people are learning about a soul as part of Christianity or other teachings. And sometimes people are learning about an afterlife, where you can see that the Buddhist teachings aren't based on any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God. But before I do so, let me just stop and see if you guys have any questions on anything I shared so far. Anything you guys would like to ask? Yeah, go ahead, Boulder. For those of you online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Okay, I have too many questions. Just first, in Buddha's time, when he's teaching, this idea of Brahma, there's the Brahman, there's sort of the priests and the Brahmas. So the idea of one God, does it exist at that time? Or you mentioned something that Jesus or Christianity, in the New Testament, that's the first mention of the one God, Allah.
Yeah. The Buddha lived from 563 BCE to 483 BCE. Jesus doesn't come along for about another 500 years later, right? So up until that point, the vast majority of the world was thinking there's multiple gods, including the people that the Buddha was teaching. But it wasn't until Jesus came along about 500 years later that's where he taught that there was only one God. And that's where people nowadays, the vast majority of the world, if they think about God, they think about just one God. But there are still people in the world that think there are multiple gods. But that wasn't the goal of the Buddha. The Buddha wasn't trying to prove or disprove how many gods, or if there's one God, or even if God exists or not. His goal was to help you get to liberation, to enlightenment. But he did teach about this great Brahma, which is what we would refer to as God. And then he taught about these other gods too, that the people believed in during the time. He talked about these beings as well, as being beings. Mm-hmm.
I've heard it said that, the Buddha, there's so many words and different teachings, the same things, but worded differently, because he was very good at reaching different audiences,
Mhm.
that he would deliver this to these people according to what he thought was their understanding. He would read his audience a little bit.
Mhm.
That's what I've read about or something.
Mhm.
Do you think that maybe all this talk of God was something he would just say to relieve sort of the really God-fearing people, or people who really just to sort of appease them,
Mhm.
say, there's this, but we're not going to talk about it too much. This is what we're focusing on. Just sort of acknowledge it, just to
Mhm.
quiet them down.
Yeah, a Buddha is only going to teach things that they've independently verified and they know to be true with 100% certainty. So he would have needed to have had experience in interacting with this being in order to be able to teach it. He wouldn't just teach it just for the sake of teaching it. A Buddha only teaches what they know to be true. So if there was a group of people that had certain beliefs in God, sure, he would teach them, but he would teach them what he knows to be true with 100% certainty. Mhm. All right. Okay. Let me see if we have any questions online. I don't see any questions here. Okay. So now let me share with you guys how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God, because a relationship with God is not required in order to get to enlightenment, but it also won't hinder you from getting to enlightenment if you learn and practice in the way that I'm going to share with you here. Depending on what you've been taught as you were growing up as a child, you might have been taught things like to fear God, or you might have been taught that God punishes you and rewards you and things like this. And these things aren't true. So I'm going to help you to be able to, strip that away, to be able to see with your own independent verification that these things aren't true, so that if you're interested in having a relationship with this being, you can. Because how could you ever have a relationship with a being that you fear? Right? Like if you had a life partner that you lived with and every day you came home from work, you had fear of that person. How could you ever have a healthy relationship with that being? Right? So sometimes what people are talking about and what they're discussing about, this being punishes you and rewards you, or you got to fear this being, or you got to worship this being. This is what people are saying today. But this isn't necessarily what this being is interested in. This being isn't interested in you fearing it. This being isn't interested in you thinking that it's punishing you and rewarding you. But unfortunately, this is what some people have come to over the years. But you can see here through the teachings of the Buddha a better way to approach these kinds of things. And you could have a healthy relationship if you'd like. So the first one is that you're going to need to understand right view as it relates to this relationship with God. That it's not God who's punishing you and rewarding you. It's not God that determines what you experience. That it's your decisions that are leading to any particular results that you're experiencing. That's what right view is based on, is the Four Noble Truths. Understanding that if you experience happiness, excitement, or elation, or you experience anger, or sadness, or frustration, or shyness, or boredom, or loneliness, this is all coming from your own mind. It's not coming from God. And part of that right view is to understand the natural law of Gotama, of cause and effect, that you have free will, and that anything that you are choosing to do, it's going to produce any particular results. It's not this being that's determining what you experience. Then you're going to need to eliminate any craving that you might have towards this being. Sometimes people are taught to pray to this being and ask for things, and that this being is going to magically make these things available to you. So if you've been taught that, you might have been in prayer before, begging and pleading with this being to give you something, right? And you can see that that didn't actually occur. And this is where sometimes people get angry and have a lot of hostility towards this being. Because if your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa is nearing death and they're in the hospital, and you pray to this being and say, God, please save my mom, save my dad, save my brother or sister, my grandma and grandpa, and then they end up dying, you might think that it's this being who's done that, right? Because this being, you think, maybe has this all-powerful way of doing things, and you think that maybe this being should save your mom and dad. And now when your mind isn't getting what you want, you get angry, and you might attribute that to God, that it's God that's causing that anger. And you might have bitterness and hostility and resentment towards this being. So if you've been taught to pray to this being, and this being's like a genie in a bottle, and this being's going to give you whatever you want, and you don't get what you want, then those painful feelings come in, and now you get angry at this being God, thinking that this being is what's causing your painful feelings, when in reality it's your own mind. And people have just taught you unwisely that somehow this being is like a genie in a bottle, right? So don't believe other people that this being is a genie in a bottle and that it can provide you anything and everything. But also don't believe me that this being isn't that. You need to be able to see the truth for yourself. So we can do a little test right here, right? I'm going to pray to God, and I'm going to ask God for lots of things, and we'll see, does God provide this, right? So, dear God, please give us $5 million so that we can go feed the disadvantaged people in Thailand and we can give them food. Can you please, please, please give us $5 million? Hasn't shown up, right? So we can see the truth for ourselves that prayer doesn't produce results in our life. That if we're interested in money and having money to feed people that don't have food, we're going to need to go get that money. That's the cause and effect. That's the natural law of karma. We're going to need to make decisions to go work, earn money, and then choose to use that money to feed people, if that's what we would like to do, right? It's not this being God that's going to do that for us, right? So if you've been taught that God is a genie in a bottle, this just isn't true. And your prayers are going to go unanswered, so to speak. And now when you're not getting what you want, your mind will be angry about that and maybe attribute that to God when it's not God that's causing that anger. So if you're interested in prayer and praying to this God, if you know that this God exists, you can tell this God, hey, I know you exist. Or if you don't know whether this God exists, you can say that too. Like, hey, I don't know if you exist or not. Or you might even say, hey, I believe in you. I believe that you exist. You can say any of those kinds of things. And then you can say, I'm open to your guidance and give thanks for this being to be in your life, because this being actually can guide you on the path to enlightenment. It can actually help you by having knowledge and wisdom come into your mind. You're still going to need to learn, reflect, and practice in order to be able to now determine whether that's true or false. But this being actually can give you guidance. If you've ever done something before and there was almost like this fatherly advice or grandfatherly advice, where you know that that wisdom isn't something that you knew in the past, but somehow this wisdom came into your mind, this is what God is able to do. And if you have a relationship with this being and you let this being know that you're open to its guidance, it can actually do this for you. But it's not going to be on your call. You're not going to be like, hey, God, tell me, should I turn left or should I turn right? You know, God's not going to do that. But as you're going through life, if this being thinks that you have some certain guidance that would be beneficial for you, this being can actually help you. So if you choose to have a relationship with this being, you can pray to this being and have a conversation with this being, but it would be unwise to just ask for things. Give me this and give me this and give me that and give me that. You know, I don't know what it's like to be God, but if you can imagine billions of people on the planet, a certain amount of those actually pray. I'm sure well into the millions, probably billions of people pray to God. Can you imagine just sitting there and everybody's making these constant requests? Give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that. If you had a friend that called you up every day and was asking you for stuff, give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that, how long would it take before you stopped answering the phone? Right? Probably not more than about 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 or 5 days. What's that? Block them. Yeah. Right. Because that's essentially what people are doing through prayer. Give me this and give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that and give me this and give me that. Right. I was like, man, like, calm down, relax. You know, if you would like something, go get it yourself. Right. So this being isn't going to magically make things appear for you. That's not what this being does. So you're going to need to eliminate your craving to obtain things from this being through prayer, understanding that it's not a genie in a bottle. And then you're going to need to eliminate any craving to be with God. Sometimes people have a longing, a yearning to be with God after they die. They think that they're going to die, go to heaven, and be with God permanently for the rest of their life. And they have this longing, yearning, and this craving to do that. Well, as long as you have that, that means you're not content in the present moment. There's something else that you want. Your mind is longing, yearning for something, and you're not peaceful and joyful in the present moment. So you're going to need to eliminate that craving. So any kind of craving, desire, attachment towards God, you're going to need to eliminate that through understanding that that's just going to produce discontentedness in your mind. Then you're going to need to understand the natural law of Gotama, understanding that what you experience is a result of your decisions, not this being of God. That again, if you have food on the table, that didn't come from God. It came from you and your decisions, or your family's decisions, or the people around you. That's what led to that food, right? It doesn't mean you can't be thankful for the fact that you have food, but it's not this being that gave you that food. It's your own decisions that led to that. Anything you experience wholesome in your life, it's coming from decisions that you make. Any unwholesome things you experience, it's coming from decisions that you make. Oftentimes what we do in the unenlightened state is we think anything wholesome that's happening in my life, that's because of me. But all this unwholesome stuff that's happening, that's because of other people, right? But you can't have it both ways, right? You can't have it like this, because that's not true reality, that anything good is because of me, anything bad is because of other people. This is the mind's ego, thinking that I'm so right and everybody else is so wrong. So what you're experiencing, either wholesome or unwholesome, is coming from your own decisions. It's this natural law of Gotama. It's not coming from God. You're going to need to eliminate the fear of God. That's why I taught about elimination of fear first, is that if you have fear for this being God and you fear this being, you're not going to be able to have a healthy relationship with this being. So you're going to need to get to the point that you don't have fear of this being, realizing that this being isn't punishing you and it's not rewarding you. This being isn't judging you. It's not looking at your life, sending you to a good place or a bad place at the end of this life. Sometimes that's what people are taught, that it's this being that's sending people to a good place or a bad place. And now if you've done bad things during your life, we're going to send you to hell and burn for eternity. Well, we know that this being God, if you're aware of this being, is very wise and very powerful, right? Well, let me ask you a question. We know that human beings aren't as wise as this being, but let me ask you a question. If you had a child or you had a family member who made some mistakes in their life, would you send them to a place like hell to burn for eternity just because they've made some mistakes in their life? Would you do that? You wouldn't do that, right? And you know that you're not as wise potentially as this being of God. So if you wouldn't do it, why do we think this being would do it, right? But people have gotten this belief and they're fearful of this being, thinking that this being is going to send them to a place like hell and burn for eternity. Well, you wouldn't do that. So why do we think this being would do that? And you're not as smart or as wise as this being, right? So people are oftentimes believing these things and it's producing fear in their mind. This being isn't sending you to a good place or a bad place. It's your own decisions that are producing any result that you experience in your day-to-day life. So there's no need to fear this being. There's nothing this being's doing to cause you harm. It's not punishing you and it's not rewarding you. It's your own decisions that are doing that. So sometimes when I share these kinds of things, people have different questions about, well, if this is true that we can't pray to God and get things, and it's not God who's punishing us and rewarding us, then what is this being doing? What is the purpose of this being? So one of the ways you might think about understanding God is that this being is a practitioner of these teachings. This being created these natural laws, so it understands these natural laws very clearly. But this being is not attached to us, and it's not responsible to restrain us. What I mean by this being is not attached to us, for you guys, if you're attached to your parents or you're attached to your life partner, if you see them struggling in life, you experience painful feelings. If you see that they're sick, you experience painful feelings. That's because you're craving for them to be permanently healthy when it's not possible for them to be permanently healthy. Or you're having a craving for them to have something permanently, and it's not possible for them to be permanently alive. It's not possible. So you have a craving, desire, attachment for these relationships that you're in. Over time, you can train your mind to not have that craving, desire, attachment, so that when mom's sick, you understand that that's normal. You're not upset by that. You're not angry by that. You're not sad by that, but you just make wise decisions to help mom so that she can get healthy if it's possible for her to get healthy. But at some point she's going to die, right? So this being is not attached to us. This being doesn't form emotions based on us. But also this being isn't responsible to restrain us. Sometimes people think, well, if this all-knowing and all-powerful being has that knowledge and that power, then why does it allow murders to happen? Why does it allow rapes to happen? Why does it allow child abuse and poverty? Well, this being isn't allowing that to happen. Those things are actually happening because of us. Those are choices that we're making. And this being isn't responsible to restrain us. If this being restrained us every time we were going to do something unwise, then we don't have free will. And we wouldn't be interested in living in that kind of world. Because every time we went to go do something and it was unwise, this being would pull us back and we wouldn't like it. Because now we'd feel like a robot and this being is constantly controlling us. And we would never develop the wisdom that we need in order to be able to make wise decisions ourselves. I'll give you an example of this. When my young son was a toddler, he's 13 now, but when he was a toddler, there was a certain point in time where I was at home taking care of him, and he kept going over to the stove in order to touch the stove. And I kept pulling him back because it was hot, right? And he went over to touch the stove, and I would pull him back, and I would sit him down, and I would be like, by line, you can't touch the stove. It's hot, right? But he was only, I don't know, maybe 10 months old or a year and a half old or whatever he was, 2 months old. He didn't understand, right? And he kept going over to the stove. And after 2 or 3 times of pulling him back and restraining him, finally I was just like, you know what? If he'd like to touch the stove, I'm going to let him touch the stove. And I just sat there and watched him. And he walked over and closer to the stove, and he felt the heat on the stove, and he pulled his hand back, and he didn't touch the stove any longer. Where when I kept restraining him and pulling him back, he didn't gain the wisdom that he needed to not touch the stove. So he kept trying to touch the stove. But the moment I stopped restraining him and let him cultivate the wisdom that he needed, he understood, that's hot. I don't like that, and I'm not going to do that anymore. So if this being God restrained us every time we went to do something unwise, we would never cultivate the wisdom that we need to be able to make wise decisions, and we would keep trying to do that same thing over and over and over again, just like the little baby, just like the child. So this being, they're not attached to us, but they are also not responsible to restrain us. So if we choose to murder someone, then that's what we choose to do. That's a choice that we're making. And now we're going to experience the consequences of that. And now we would learn from that, and we would potentially become a better person. Whereas if this being restrained us every single time, then we would never learn that how unwise it is to murder and to kill. We would just continue to keep wanting to kill. So this being isn't responsible to stop us from doing the things that we do. We all have free will to do what we would like to do, but then we experience the consequences of that. But this being is interested in seeing us live a life in harmony with each other. But this being understands that it's up to us to decide to do that. It's not this being that's going to decide that all of us live in harmony. If we would like to live in peace and harmony, we need to make those decisions to do that. We need to cultivate the wisdom of how to live in harmony with each other. It's not this being that's going to snap its fingers and instantly create a perfect world for us. Because as soon as that being did that, let's just say this being snapped its fingers and created a perfect world for us, well, within a matter of seconds or minutes, we'd be right back into the same problems again, because we don't have the wisdom of how to live in a harmonious way with each other. So this being isn't attached to us, steps back, lets us have our free will, but then we need to cultivate the wisdom of how to live in harmony with each other. And this being's interested in seeing that occur, but it's not responsible for that to occur. And it's not attached to that. It's not longing, yearning for that. So if you're interested in having a relationship with this being, this is the way to do it, is to practice right view, understanding that it's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result. Understand that you're going to need to eliminate craving, desire, attachment with this being, understanding it's not a genie in a bottle, and it's not about living with this being permanently after this life. That's not what's going to lead to your peace and joy in this life if you're longing, yearning for something after this. You need to understand the natural law of karma, if everything you're experiencing is based on your decisions, and that you don't need to fear this being. This being isn't punishing us or rewarding us. And this being is not responsible to restrain us, but it is interested in seeing us live in harmony, but it's our responsibility to cultivate the wisdom of how to do that. So I'm going to pause here before I teach you how to have no relationship with God and still get to enlightenment, because you can do it that way too. Okay. Any questions on this?
Yes, I have multiple questions. The first question is about like the free will.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's a right question, but like when we see like we have the free will to choose, but is it the action itself is really free?
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Like because you mentioned like, oh, this morning should I have a breakfast or not? Like when we make the decision, we thought, okay, I can make a decision. I don't want to have a breakfast this morning. But is this real my selection, or is my free will? I'm not sure. Maybe we just kind of characters in computer or like a game, right? And then everything has been decided, not like the part we thought we are making the. I don't know. It's just some like a crazy ideas on my mind.
So in the present moment, when you're walking down the street, you're choosing whether I should eat or not. Or back at your hotel, you're choosing whether you should eat or not. It's a choice that you're making. There's nobody that's forcing you to make that choice. You're making that choice. There's no pre-program in your mind. There's no predetermination. It's in the moment you've made the decision not to eat or to eat. That's a decision that you're making. Nobody's making that for you. You need to be able to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this way. But like I don't know, like underneath, for example, like if I'm going to the street, should I have a food or not? It might be decided by yesterday how or how happy I be, right? How it depends on lots of factors. And if those factors can decide the decision currently I'm making, then there's no free will, because all the condition before is decided by previous condition. And and from the beginning of the universe, everything has been decided. That's my
So
my thought.
How full you were yesterday? Who decided whether you ate yesterday or not? That was you.
Yeah.
Who decided to purchase that watch that you have on your arm, on your wrist?
Yeah. Well,
who decided to purchase those glasses that you have?
Yeah, I took the action to purchase.
Yeah.
But like the decision actually is based on all my education, my like the parents, or a lot of things like around me, and all those factors actually is also depend on their parents and all past things happening in this world.
So in order for that to occur, you would have to have a massive amount of storage space in your mind to remember all of these things, right? So let me ask you a question. What was your second grade teacher's name?
I can't which subject?
You can't remember, right?
I can remember one of them.
Yeah, just one of them, right?
Yeah.
So in order for there to be predetermination or pre-programming of your mind to make all these little individual decisions that you make on an individual basis, you'd have to have a massive amount of storage space in your mind to be able to remember every single little decision that you're going to make for the rest of this life. It's just not the way things are. And you need to be able to see that truth for yourself, because I can't convince you of that. I'm not even interested in convincing you of that. You need to be able to see the wisdom yourself, that you are in each individual moment making a decision. Like even just picking up that microphone, that was your choice that chose to do that. Nobody forced you to do that. That was your free will that led to that.
Got it.
And some of these things, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this in your class or not, but some of these things that you learn about with the teachings of the Buddha, you're not going to be able to see it right away when someone's talking to you like this. Sometimes what you need to do is you need to take in what it is that's being shared with you and then step away and reflect on that and think about it. And you might come to a conclusion about free will at some point in the future. But right now, today, at this moment, you might not come to that conclusion about free will. So you're going to, sometimes certain topics of the Buddha, you're going to need to learn it and understand it, and then think about it, reflect on it, maybe even come back and ask some more questions, think about that for a little bit. So this growth and development on the path, it's kind of an iterative process that you're constantly learning and growing and developing. So don't put the expectation on yourself that you need to understand this right now in this moment, because I understand that sometimes people's minds think the way that you think. I've heard this before from other students too, but this wisdom that the Buddha is sharing with you of how to get to peace and joy and liberation, you're not going to be able to see that truth in just 1 second or one conversation. It oftentimes takes multiple conversations and reflection and thinking about things. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so now let's talk about how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God. If you're not interested in having a relationship with God, you can still get to enlightenment. Just like I mentioned, you can have a relation with your neighbor or not have a relation with your neighbor, and you'll live life just fine. It's always nice to have a relation with your neighbor because they can watch over your house. You can borrow some sugar, some salt, and you can have, hey, neighbor, how are you? How's your day going? It's always nice to have that relationship, but you don't have to. You can go through life without that too. So that's the same thing here, is that because God's not the one who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not, it's your decisions. You can choose to have a relation with this being and you'll receive guidance to be able to help you along your journey or not. And that's fine. You can still get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being. But there's one thing that you need to be able to understand if you're not going to have a relationship with this being. That if you're not going to have a relationship with this being and you're interested in getting to enlightenment, you're going to at least need to get to the point where you don't have any anger, hatred, or ill will towards this being. That you have loving kindness. And it's not just towards this being, it's towards every being. That if you have any anger, hatred, or ill will, or frustration, or agitation, or annoyance, or even the slightest dislike in your mind towards any being whatsoever, you won't be able to experience enlightenment because your mind still has pollution. That if you have dislike towards this being, not just God, but let's just say any other being, that's because you're having craving, desire, attachment. You're longing, yearning for people to be a certain way. And when they're that way, you like them. But when they're not that way, you dislike them. That dislike is coming from your own mind because you have craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations for people to be a certain way. And that's the permanence that the mind's craving. So if you dislike another being, it's because you're craving permanence and they don't meet your criteria of what you want. So sometimes people can have anger and hatred and ill will towards this being of God. So for example, if you, again, were praying and you were saying, God, please save my mom. Please save my mom. I don't want her to die. Please, save her. And you thought that he's supposed to grant you wishes. And now all of a sudden your mom dies. Someone could be angry at God, thinking that God didn't give them what they wanted, right? Or say you grew up as a child and you were being either physically or sexually abused by people in a environment where they were teaching about God. And maybe as a child, you were being abused by this individual sexually, and you think that God's the one who creates everything. If you don't understand the natural law of God, you think that everything that happens to you is because of God. And now when you were sexually abused, you think that that was God that was doing that to you. You could have a lot of anger and hatred towards this being. So if you've grown up this way to get to the point where you have anger and hatred toward this being for any reason whatsoever, you're going to need to liberate your mind from that. You're going to need to free your mind of that because it's just harming your own mind. So if you're not interested in a relation with this being, that's fine. You'll still be able to get to enlightenment. But if you have anger and hatred and ill will in your mind towards this being or any other being, you're not going to be able to experience the peace and the joy and the freedom of the enlightened mental state. So that loving kindness meditation would be perfect to help you to be able to eliminate your anger and hatred towards any being, including this being of God. So if you do have anger towards this being, you're going to need to put them in your loving kindness meditation. And then whenever anger comes up in your day-to-day life towards this being, you're going to need to cut it off and let it go and eliminate it out of the mind. And this is ultimately what's going to free your mind of that particular anger. Sometimes people think that they can keep their anger in the corner of their mind just for this one ex-boyfriend, this one ex-girlfriend. I'm just going to keep that anger there, but I'm going to love everybody else, right? This isn't actually true, because that anger is going to come out towards other people too. When you're checking in at a ticket counter at the airport and they don't maybe do the things the way you want them to do it, you'll be angry and bitter and harsh with that person, and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So you can't keep your anger hidden in a corner and it's just going to be towards this being and only that being, right? So you're going to need to completely free your mind of all anger, hatred, and ill will, not just towards this being, but any being. But if you're interested in going forward in life and get to enlightenment without the relationship with this being, you're going to need to get to the point where you don't have anger, hatred, or even the slightest dislike towards this being. You might take the position, I don't know if this being exists or not, but if it exists, fine. If it doesn't exist, that's fine too. And now I'm just going to go forward in life and just go about my merry way. And hey, whatever happens, happens with that being. But you don't have any anger or hatred towards this being. That's one of the ways to go forward on this path. And some people might choose that. So you can still get to enlightenment if that's the approach that you take. But if you would like to get to enlightenment without this relationship, you need to at least have loving kindness towards all beings, including this being. So any questions here about how to either have a relationship with this being and get to enlightenment, or not have a relationship with this being and still get to enlightenment? No questions? Okay. Let me see here. All right. I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay. So it's 12 o'clock. We can actually take an hour-and-a-half lunch break and come back if you guys would like, because afterwards I have this next topic of meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. I can teach that to you and how to do it. Or the other option, if you guys would like, because it would take me about probably 5 or 10 minutes to teach this to you. I can teach it to you now, and then we can be done for the rest of the day. It's up to you guys how you would like to do that. Usually what I do is I teach this after lunch, and then I invite you guys to do it if you would like to do it. It's not like you do it one time and you're going to completely eliminate your sexual craving, because I know some of you guys may be not interested in eliminate your sexual craving, especially if you're young and you're in a relationship, or maybe you're interested in having a family someday, or something like that. But this is a tool that you might need at some point in your journey to enlightenment, that you might need to knock down your sexual cravings. So part of what you're doing on the path is you're assembling this tool belt so that then you can use these different tools at different times. So I can either take a lunch break for you guys if you like and then come back, or I can just teach it to you now and then we can be done in probably about 10 minutes. So let me take a vote. Who would like to learn this now and then be done for the rest of the day? Okay. All right. That's the majority of the class. Okay. So let me teach this to you. Okay. So as you guys have learned, for those of you guys that have been here, there's these 4 preliminary phases that your mind goes through on your way to enlightenment. They're referred to as the jhanas. These are where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind. Then there's these 4 stages of enlightenment that your mind goes through on your way to enlightenment. And the 4th stage is where your mind is actually enlightened, where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. And it's a gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can make your way all the way up to the 2nd stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship. There's no harm in having sex in terms of if you're doing it in the way that the Buddha taught, where you're in a loyal, loving, committed relationship, right? If you were having sex with minors, or you were forcing people to have sex, like raping them, or you were to have sex outside of your relationships and things like this, that's going to cause harm and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. But you could get to the 2nd stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship with a loyal, loving, committed relationship. And you could be doing all the other work on the path to enlightenment that you need to do, that we've been talking about, like eliminating the ego and things like this, eliminating your anger and frustration and all this other things that you could need to be doing. The thing is, you can get to that second stage of enlightenment and still be having sex, and your mind would actually be quite peaceful in that second stage of enlightenment. It's not going to be permanently peaceful, but it'll be quite peaceful, where if you do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, you'll be peaceful in all other areas of your life. But in terms of sex, you're still going to get angry. You're still going to get frustrated occasionally, because in some situations, you're going to be able to have sex and you're going to feel really great and you're going to feel pleasant feelings based on that. But then in other situations, you're not going to be able to have sex and you're going to be agitated or frustrated or annoyed. And this is why the mind can't be permanently peaceful and joyful as long as you have sexual craving in your mind. So there's this meditation that the Buddha taught to help you eliminate your sexual cravings. Whereas if you have like 5 or 10 different boyfriends or girlfriends and you're having sex with all these people and you're realizing that you should only have one and that would be better for you, you can use this meditation to knock down some of your sexual craving. And now you could have one loyal, loving, committed relationship. Or if you're in a loyal, loving, committed relationship and you guys have gotten to the point where you're interested in moving from the second stage of enlightenment into the third and fourth stage of enlightenment, you might be interested in getting rid of sexual activity 100%. And you're no longer interested in having sex, that you would like to move beyond that. And this is where this meditation comes in. Sometimes people think having sex is the love. We even call it making love sometimes, right? That's really not what's happening. The sex isn't the love. The love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, having active goodwill towards others. This sexual activity that you're involved in, this is just you guys stimulating each other's senses in order to get to a heightened state of mind where ultimately you would orgasm. Right? That's essentially the goal of sex, is to spend time together, yes, to bond together, to do something special together, that this is a person who you trust and you're willing to have this sexual activity with them. But ultimately at the height of this, there's an orgasm where the mind's got such pleasant feelings that the body has some kind of sensation in response to that, right? So this sexual activity is not the love, but if you identify with that as being your love, when you and your partner are no longer having sex, or the sex isn't as good as it used to be, you'll think that your love is gone, right? So it's important that you don't look at the sexual activity as the love, because you'll initially, when you're in a relationship and it's all new and it's very stimulating sex, you'll think, wow, this is a great relationship. We're having great sex. But then after 3, 4, 5, 6 years, however many years, when the sex isn't the same anymore, it's not as stimulating, you'll think the love is gone, where the sex isn't an indication of whether you love each other or not, right? And then also as you age and your bodies are changing and maybe you don't look as attractive as you once did, this can also affect the mind too. And when you guys are choosing not to have sex any longer, you might think that somehow the love is gone. And now you might change your relationship to go find that next new stimulating relationship where now it's all new. It's sex with a new person, and now it's stimulating again, right? And now if you think that those pleasant feelings that you're getting through sex, if you think that's the love, then you might keep ending relationships and moving from one person to the next, thinking that that's the love, where otherwise this was a great relationship, but your mind just wasn't understanding that that sexual relationship isn't the love. And now you might be ending a relationship in order to go find another relationship where you're just involved in new sexual activity, and all of a sudden it's stimulating again. Or the other thing that can happen with sex is that somebody, particularly men, but also with women sometimes too, you might identify with who you are as a person through your sexual relationship. Right? If you guys are having sex and you're having knockdown, drag out sex and wow, so pleasurable, you might think like, yeah, I'm knocking it out. I'm a man, right? Or wow, look at all these men attracted to me who are interested in having sex with me. Now, maybe you might think like, wow, look how handsome I am or how beautiful I am, that all these people are attracted to me. And you might think of your self-worth through your sex and think that that determines whether you're a worthy person or not. If people are interested in having sex with you, wow, look how great I am. If people aren't interested in having sex with you, you might think of yourself as less of a person. It's important for you to not do that, because that's your mind not understanding that this sexual activity is essentially getting to pleasant feelings with someone that you trust, and you guys are interacting with each other and having this stimulating, yes, it's a bonding experience to have sex, but at the end of the day, you're helping each other get to pleasant feelings, right? So ultimately, if you continue to do that, you won't be able to get to permanent peace and permanent joy, because your pleasure is based on the fact that I get sex, I feel pleasure. When I don't get sex, I don't feel pleasure. I feel maybe bored or lonely or sad or frustrated or mundane, right? So the mind can't ever get to permanent peace and permanent joy as long as it continues to have this sexual craving. So you can get to that second stage of enlightenment and do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, and you might hang out there for a while. Maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, particularly if you're young and you're interested in maybe having a family someday, you might hang out there for a long time, or maybe you're in a committed relationship, right? So that's a choice for each individual to make. But when or if you ever get to a point where you're interested in either reducing or eliminating your sexual contact, that's where this meditation comes in. And while we're talking about sex, I would like to just point out, because I didn't teach this in this class yet, I teach it in other courses, is that when the Buddha talks about sexual misconduct, he never talks about same-gender relationships as being unwise. And he was aware of same-gender relationships during his lifetime because they were existing during that time frame too. There's never been a time in history where every man had sex with a woman and every woman had sex with a man. Because we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that, yeah, some men like to have sex with women and some women like to have sex with men, but that's not everybody, because that would be permanence if that was everybody. Some men like to have sex with other men, and some women like to have sex with other women. This is normal. So if you're someone who has same-gender relationships, or you know someone who does, it's normal. You're not actually causing any harm to anybody whatsoever. If there's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, there's no harm. And the Buddha understood this because he talks about it during his teachings. You can see that he talks about men and women who don't identify with their masculinity or their femininity. And he was aware of this, but when he talked about sexual misconduct, he doesn't include same-gender relationships because he was aware that this doesn't cause any harm. And I like to point out, this is how wise this individual was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood that same-gender relationships doesn't cause harm. Right now, today, we don't have people in the world that don't understand that. And there's people today, 2,500 years later, that don't understand that. But 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. This is how wise this individual was. So whether you choose to have sex with the same gender or opposite gender, that's a choice for you to make. Whether you choose to have sex or not have sex or eliminate sex, that's also a choice for you to make. But if you're interested in getting to the permanent peace and permanent joy, eventually you're going to need to let go of sexual activity. And as we age, this tends to happen almost naturally, but you can actually induce this through this meditation. Sometimes people are interested in getting rid of their sexual craving prior to when they age, because eventually you'll have enough sex where it's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. How many more times can we do it that way? Right? And you'll kind of be over it. It's kind of like chocolate and ice cream. When we were children, we thought it was the very best thing ever, and we couldn't have ever imagined not having chocolate and ice cream. But now, all these years later, it was like, yeah, we've had enough chocolate and ice cream. If we have it, we have it. If we don't, we don't. Right? And you can train your mind with chocolate and ice cream to not be angry and not be upset and not be frustrated if you don't have chocolate and ice cream. But unfortunately, sex isn't that way. We can't train our mind to do that. If you're having sex, you'll feel really great. You'll feel really wonderful. And if you're not having sex, but you really want to have sex, you're going to still have that anger and frustration. So that's why the Buddha taught from the second stage of enlightenment to the third stage of enlightenment. This is where somebody eliminates their sexual craving. But again, you can get in that second stage of enlightenment and your life's going to be quite peaceful. But every once in a while, You're going to want sex and you can't get it. And then you're going to be frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. And that's why your mind's not permanently in that peace and joy. So the way that this works is that, apologize, this is a dissected body. I thought it was the next slide. I usually give you guys a heads up about this. The way that this meditation works is that you look at pictures of dead corpses and you sit there with your eyes open, staring at the dead corpse, and you develop what's called the perception of an attractiveness of the body. Because the reason why we want to have sex is because we have craving in our mind. But then when we see another person, we see the outer show. We see the hair, the makeup, the clothes, the jewelry, what have you. And now we see that as enticing. We see that as something that is going to be pleasurable for us. And now we want to have sex with that, because we're interested in getting those pleasant feelings. But if you develop what's called the unattractiveness of the body, where you no longer see the body as being attractive, now your mind's not going to be interested to have sex with that any longer, right? By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll know, wow, that man's really handsome, or wow, that woman's very beautiful. You'll know that, but your mind won't have a craving for sexual contact. And the way that we do this is with these pictures, is that you can download these off the internet and you can just stare at it and sit there for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes just staring at it, developing this unattractiveness of the body. The way that they did it during the lifetime of the Buddha, because they didn't have photographs during his lifetime, is they would actually use a real dead corpse. That they would have a dead corpse at the temple, and this corpse was going to be burned maybe 3 days from now or 5 days from now, and it was just sitting there rotting with maggots. And they would sit around the body and they would stare at the body, and the maggots and the grubs and different things, and the decomposition was occurring. And not only did they see that occurring, but they smelt it too. And now the odor kind of changed the perspective of the mind, that they're no longer interested in having sex with this being. So you can actually do this too. It's less likely nowadays, but you can go to places called cadaver labs, where I did this in America at one point, where we used to pay money because we were in the massage field, and we would go look at dead bodies. And in America, it was like $15, and you could go into this cadaver lab where somebody had donated their body to science, and they would have 3, 4, 5, 10 different bodies in there, and you could see all these different bodies, and you could smell it and things like this. So it's possible for you to do this even today. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, this was pretty prevalent, that they were dealing with these dead bodies, and they would just look at the body, they would smell the body, and it would develop the perception of unattractiveness in the mind of the body. And they would also do things, it was called 32-part body meditation, where they would sit and they would imagine the 32 different parts of the body. They would start with the hair, and then they would go to the skin, or the oil on the skin, and they would basically dissect the body within their own mind. And the Buddha has this 32-part body meditation, where you go all the way through the different organs, like the heart, the lungs, the liver, the gallbladder, and you imagine this in your mind. So this is something the Buddha taught, but it's not as frequently used today as this. Looking at dead bodies tends to be a better imprint for the mind to be able to develop the unattractiveness of the body. So this is how you would do this meditation. And, the situations that you would do it in is if you had lots of partners and you were trying to get down to one, you have this strong sexual craving, or maybe you're even in a one relationship with one partner, but you're having this strong craving to go outside your relationship. You can knock it down with this, right? It's not like you do it one time and then your sexual craving's gone. It's going to be gradual. So if you had a really high sexual craving, you might do this for 2 months or 3 months, knock it down, knock it down, knock it down, knock it down. When it's at a better state that you feel comfortable with, maybe you stop doing this meditation, and now you're kind of more comfortable within your own mind, that you're not longing, yearning for sex so much, and you don't have that discontentedness because of it. Or if you're in that second stage of enlightenment, or making your way to that stage, and you would like to get rid of sexual contact 100%, that's when you would use this meditation and trying to get rid of sexual craving 100%. So there's other things that you would need besides this meditation. That's where the Eightfold Path comes in. But this is another tool that you can use at different times. So any questions on this?
Yeah. How we use it? Just curious how we use it in meditation. Just imagination, or just look at it then for like a 10 minutes or.
Yeah, this meditation you do with your eyes open, where you put it up like on a screen or you print it out and you just sit there and you stare at the dead body and you imprint it in your mind that the body is unattractive. So you just stare at the body. So you like look at the hair, the eyes, the chin, the arms, the hands, the body, the dissected body that it's open up. You look at every last little detail of the body.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Leo?
Would it be possible to do it just with this photo you have available for us, or?
Yeah, you would like to get this photo?
No, would it be possible to quench or to eliminate this craving just with this one photo? If I do it for 5 months, just with this one photo, or would you suggest to find other photos? Yeah,
it would be helpful to have multiple photos. Yeah, to use different photos so that you have a variety of different ones. But you might use this one for several weeks or months and then move to another one and use that one for several weeks or months. That's going to just help your mind. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead, Boulder.
I've heard of meditation of sorts relating to this.
Mm-hmm.
That I heard about. I thought it was interesting with sexual craving. You mentioned Mara, and it was sort of an approach where it's like you're mindful. It's a mindfulness thing, mm-hmm. And when the sexual craving is there, you just sort of say, Mara, I see you, mm-hmm. This type of thing. But the emphasis in that whole thing, and not just in meditation, also in meditation, but to also start to be aware of the absence of this craving, noticing when it's not there. And when you start noticing, emphasizing, I haven't even thought about sex for 2 days or something, to be always more aware of the lack of desire, mm-hmm. To start focusing on when it's not there, and then it'll be more frequent. That approach too.
Yeah, the Buddha never taught that. He just taught to observe the mind with mindfulness, that whenever an unwholesome thought comes in, you cut that off and let it go. And then when a wholesome thought is there, you support that, encourage it, not allowing it to fade away. So what you're talking about is maybe you're just reflecting and reminding yourself that, yeah, you haven't had that thought. That's fine. There's no harm in that. But ultimately, you would like to be attentive to the mind so that if the thought of sex came into your mind, you cut that off and let it go. That's in addition to this, right? This is kind of helping imprint this in the mind. But then as you're going about your day, if you're at a point where you're looking to get rid of sexual activity, wherever you have the thought come up, or you're sitting there like staring at another person, or you're kind of looking like, wow, look at him or look at her, you're kind of like doing that, you'd like to cut that off and let it go and train your mind to move in the opposite direction. There were times where I'd be in the mall and I'd be behind somebody and my eyes would catch this person who's walking in front of me, and I would see their hips or their neck or something, and I would just dip into a store or go to the bathroom and I would just let that person go. Or I would look down towards the ground. I had to cut that off actively to train your mind not to look at that and get any kind of pleasure from it. And that's going to help you to get rid of that. And that's where your mind then becomes more and more peaceful, because you're not longing, yearning, like, wow, look at her, look at him, wow, oh my gosh. Your mind's not doing that anymore, where it's not pulling. But in order to get to that point, this meditation and then cutting off and letting go in the moment when your mind is pulling is what will help you to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see if we have any questions here. All right, I don't see any questions here. All right, so I'm going to end class for today. Normally we finish at 3, but today is a day where if it works out, then we sometimes end early on Thursday. So tomorrow, when we come back together for class, I'm going to teach this meditation to realize non-self. This is another meditation that the Buddha taught to help you eliminate that personal existence view. I'll teach you guys this tomorrow. Then we're going to do that together. Then I'll teach you guys this 5 hindrances, removing the obstructions to your enlightenment. There are certain hindrances that the Buddha discovered that are going to block you from getting to enlightenment. So I'll teach you guys that tomorrow. Then I'm going to teach you how to determine if you have attained enlightenment, because that's what the Buddha is guiding you to, is to be able to attain this enlightened mental state. So I'll teach you how to determine that. Then I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life and how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment, because our course is kind of coming to a close. And then tomorrow we usually finish up before lunch typically. So if you guys would like to go out to a group lunch tomorrow, we can all go out to a group lunch if you like. It's up to you. Give you some time to kind of sit down and have a meal with each other. So we'll talk about that tomorrow when we get to that point. So whatever you guys choose to do today, have a really wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap.